Good morning. Contrary to what the screen says, I'm not Tim Hogan this morning. I'm, in fact, just Melanie E. I'm Commissioner of the Department of Buildings. Thanks, everybody, for joining. I know we've had a great first 4 days of our first ever digital conference, so thank you all for participating this year in Build Safe, Live Safe telephonically. We're very excited about this week's event. I'm very excited about your next speaker, Tim Hogan, our fantastic Deputy Commissioner, who everybody knows and loves. But before we get to Tim and his great report, let's talk a little about where we are at the department, what we've been doing, and where we're going. Like everybody else, we've been struggling, dealing with, thriving in some capacities, this pandemic. I say thriving because it's given us an opportunity to look at what we do, who we are, and why we do it, and figure out if that's the right way to do it. So we've grown in some ways in that regard. Since the pandemic hit, we've been out there doing more than our regular everyday business. We've grown our scope. We've grown our repertoire of work. We've done over 250,000 inspections across the city to all job sites to ensure that they were complying with the non-essential construction ban originally. And now, since construction has restarted and we've done some 90,000 inspections there, ensuring that everybody is not only following all of the code and rule requirements of the department and the city, but making sure that they're implementing measures to keep their workers safe every day of the week in a different way than the safety we traditionally talk about. So when you look at the department in the last number of months, we've really expanded what we believe is part of our mission. But we've never lost sight of our actual core mission, and that's to make sure your jobs continue to progress, whether you're in the field or in the A&E side, and that is also including making sure all of our workers who go onto a site get home every day safely to their family. And so when we talk about safety, we know this is an area of incredible importance to this department. We will do everything we can to make sure that workers who are on sites go home safely. And that means forcing a belief that a culture of safety is the most important thing on a job site. So Tim will talk you through where we are, how we got there, and I'll talk you through where we're going. So you've seen over the last year a decline, first time in nearly a decade, where we've seen an actual decline in injuries on sites and incidences on sites. This is something we should all celebrate. We've collectively, as an industry, have all participated in making sure we get those numbers lower. So this is not something that is only unique to the department, that we are only taking credit for. This is something we've done together. How we've done it from our end is making sure that we have a proactive team who does this exclusively. This is their only job, is to go out to sites and remind everybody the rules of the road and make sure everybody understands there is always somebody from the department coming through and making sure we're all living up to our expectations and doing what we're supposed to do. On top of that, you've seen us take measures like banning standoff brackets, like the education campaign we did around cold form steel with the new rules that we put in, and the on-the-job site education campaign in multiple languages, informing workers about the do's and don'ts when they're using cold form steel so they can protect themselves and be better aware of their surroundings. Because again, the name of the game is getting everybody home safely. We're doing that with exterior masonry jobs, so you'll be seeing DOB staff out there on job sites where we have exterior modernization jobs with, again, do's and don'ts in multiple languages, talking directly to workers, making sure they have what they need from the department in order to better keep themselves safe. And at the end of the day, it's about making sure DOB is more than just a regulator. It's about making sure that we're out there helping the industry learn, helping the industry grow, and protecting workers. So hopefully with this last week of our digital Build Safe, Live Safe, you've seen that transformation into a department that wants to help you grow, learn, and teach. We'll be doing more of that. Local Law 196, the hallmark, centerpiece of worker safety. We've seen the extension go out there until March 1st for those last remaining 10 hours, bringing workers up to 40 hours on some of our larger sites. Supervisors already had their 62-hour requirement, so don't delay. make sure your staff, your colleagues, yourself, you get out there, get your training. Don't wait till the last minute, because safety doesn't live by deadlines. It lives every day. So let's get out there and do that. And then in conclusion, before I have Tim take over and walk you through, I do want to just talk about a little about the positive things that we've done together. We've innovated together, we've grown together. So going forward, let's continue to move together in the right direction. We've had our innovation committees and our competitions where we talked about different and promising futures of sustainability. We'll talk about Hack the Code later, but this is really a unique time for all of us to say, what have we done in the past? What can we get rid of? And what can we do differently in the future to make us faster, more efficient, and safer? And safety being the priority of those three always. So we'll be continuing to be out there. We'll continue to do these kind of series where we listen and learn together. And with that, I hope everybody has a great rest of your morning. And I'm going to turn it over to my dear colleague, Tim Hogan, to take you through his safety report card. Thank you, guys.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning. I just wanted to start off with an overview of the incidents from calendar year 2019. As you can see from the graph, we have finally stopped a significant increase in incidents this year. We believe this was accomplished in great part to our commitment to the Construction Safety Compliance Team initiative, as well as the expansion of our Construction Safety Enforcement Team. Unfortunately, we have yet to stem the number of fatalities on sites, and we will continue to commit resources to try and reduce that number. This chart gives you a showing of the approximate amount of construction-related injuries and accidents by the percentage or the number of people that are employed. As you can see, the number employed from 18 to 19 has not dropped in any significant amount, yet we were able to cut the number of incidents. This bar chart further illustrates how we reduced the numbers of incidents by dropping below the last 3 years' levels. So as you can see, we're back to the 2015 level. This pie chart shows an analysis of which categories all of these incidents fall into. As you can see, worker falls continue to be a serious concern to this agency as well as the industry. Slide 6. Sorry. Slide 6, this chart demonstrates the reduction in over 2018 when we implemented the construction safety compliance concept, and we staffed up to visit more sites more often, focusing on safety. As you can see here, the total construction-related incidents dropped 19.7%, and the total construction-related incidents with injuries dropped 24.2%. So let's start off with our first fatality of the year for 2019. This was located at 311 East 50th Street, Manhattan. And on April 8th, a crew was doing facade repairs from a suspended scaffold, and they had placed that suspended scaffold C-hook on a standoff bracket, as you can see here in the right-hand picture. While lowering the scaffold, the bracket slipped, causing the C-hook to move forward, and that C-hook impacted the coping stone at the top of the parapet wall. The impact pushed that stone off the top of the wall, and the stone fell and hit the worker on the head, who was on the scaffold, killing him instantly. Failing to protect the coping stone and improper use of the standoff bracket both led to this death. 2 days later, on April 10th, 2 workers were completing roofing and brick column encasement repairs on the 12th floor of a building at 1 Pierpont Street in Brooklyn. While one of these workers was setting bricks, the other was moving scaffold sections and other materials near the leading edge of the roof. As you can see from this photograph, there were no guardrails and no parapet, although there was a parapet at the lower roof level. It was a high wind event day, and it appears from what we can determine that the worker was blown off the roof and fell to his death 13 stories. Although harnesses were on site, the workers did not put them on, nor did they tie off. Failure to tie off led to this death. Lack of guardrails, failure to tie off, and working in high wind conditions were all contributing factors. A few days after that, 3 days later, on April 13th, at 373 Broome Street in Manhattan, a team of workers were assembling a mobile crane to hoist mechanical equipment up to the roof. The assist crane was lifting counterweights into place. After placing one of the counterweights on the back of the crane, using 2 of the 3 ropes that were attached to the hook, the crane operator lifted the ropes away from the weight. The worker held the 2 ropes that had been attached to the weight aside so that they would not come in contact with the weight. However, the 3rd rope caught the lifting lug and it pulled the weight up in the air. The worker tried to run and jump off the crane deck, but the weight flipped over, struck the deck, and landed on top of the worker on the ground. He died from his injuries. Not taking the time to remove excess ropes that were not needed for the pick was a major contributing factor to this incident. On May 18th, a cleanup crew was brought in to clean up a site where there had been an overnight shift of workers. They had been installing curtain wall at 335 Madison Avenue in Manhattan. The overnight crew removed the guardrails that surrounded the floor opening that was being used for hoisting to make their work more efficient. As seen here in the left-hand photograph, the railings are missing. At the end of their shift, they failed to replace the railings. A cleanup crew member was sweeping the deck and walking backwards and walked into the hoisting shaft, seen on the right-hand side, and fell 3 stories to his death. Failure to maintain those safety railings in this, keeping them in place, led to this fatality. On June 22, a worker doing facade work at 880 St. Nicholas Avenue in Manhattan, a group of workers took a break for lunch. One of the workers went back up the scaffold to retrieve an item, and when he went to retrieve the item, he fell to his death. This scaffold exceeded 50 feet and was not permitted and was improperly installed, lacking decking boards and guardrails. Lack of proper installation of the scaffold and failure to put in the proper safety measures on the scaffold were the key contributing factors to this death. On June 20th, a worker was installing a pre-assembled wall section at 6804 Tides Road in Rockaway, and they were using a mobile crane. They were placing a wall section between 2 previously installed wall sections. The assembly on the crane bumped into one of the installed sections, and it broke loose from its hold-down brackets, falling over and crushing the worker who was guiding the new wall that was coming into place. Lack of proper communications, failure to sequence, and failure to shore and brace the walls that had already been put in place were all contributing factors to this fatality. Yet another fatality involving cold form steel. On August 27th, workers were building a 4-story structure at 94 East 208th Street in the Bronx. After placing the Q deck on the 3rd floor deck, the contractor accepted delivery of masonry materials onto the deck to continue construction. A week earlier, a special inspector had warned the contractor in writing that he needed to pour the 1st floor and 2nd floor decks before continuing to support the loads and to provide structural rigidity to the floor and surrounding walls. Shortly after the materials were delivered to the 3rd floor deck, the deck collapsed, killing 1 worker and injuring 5 others. Failure to brace the deck, lack of oversight by the construction super, failure to follow the special inspector's instructions, lack of knowledge surrounding the requirements of cold form steel, and lack of bracing of the cold form steel were all major contributing factors to this fatality. On 8/30/2019, workers were assembling a sidewalk shed at 3449 107th Street in Queens. A worker was standing on the back of a flatbed truck and was passing materials up to the workers who were erecting the shed. After finishing handling all the materials up to the workers on the shed, the decedent placed his foot on a cross member of the shed and his other foot on the flatbed of the truck. It appears that he was attempting to climb onto the shed. Losing his balance, he grabbed the junior beam that was on the top of the shed, but was yet unsecured to the shed frame. The I-beam slid back, hitting him in the face and causing him to fall between the shed and the truck. The I-beam followed him to the ground into the gap, and he succumbed to his injuries. Failing to properly gain access to the shed was a key factor. On October 21, workers were doing asbestos abatement cleanup at 60 Norfolk Street in Manhattan. This site was the scene of a fire more than a year earlier, and plans were to keep the facade as part of the national historic significance of it, and to remove the asbestos and other debris from the site so they could begin construction. Two workers were standing beneath the archway that you see here on the right-hand side of the screen, holding a hose to keep the dust down from the debris piles. The workers inside the church were using an excavator with crawler treads and a grappling hook, as well as a bobcat to remove the debris. The vibrations from the machinery caused the existing piece of facade to collapse in on top of the two workers working the hose, trapping one and fatally striking the other. Failure to shore and brace the existing facade and improper use of equipment led to the collapse. The building was known to have issues with stability, and the fact that they brought in mechanical equipment that would cause significant vibration was definitely a serious factor in this incident. On October 24th, workers were going up to the roof of a new 38-story hotel at 1227 Broadway in Manhattan to perform lobby fireproofing on the 35th floor. Rather than waiting for the construction hoist, the workers were able to take control of a temporary elevator platform that was awaiting the cab installation. They began manually raising the platform, and as they neared the 32nd floor, one of the workers was using his cell phone. He dropped it, and it landed on the top edge of the door frame below. As you can see in the right-hand picture, about in the middle of the right-hand picture, you'll see the cell phone. The worker lied down on the deck to try and retrieve his phone. As he reached down, he placed his head between the platform and the entry to the doors. His head contacted the 33rd floor deck, crushing his skull. He died instantly. Failure to secure the temporary elevator platform by the elevator company and allowing an untrained worker to use the controls to move that platform were both contributing factors to this fatality. Sorry. On November 11th, a newly hired worker was assigned to move a stack of plywood from the second floor deck of a residential project at 3420 Bedford Avenue in Brooklyn. The plywood was piled on top of a shaftway, and they were getting ready to start working on that shaftway. So they told the person, the worker, to remove the pieces of plywood off the area so that they could begin construction. He was not made aware that the bottom panel of the plywood covered a yet-to-be-constructed stairwell and that it was unsecured to the deck. They did not have a controlled access zone around the plywood stack, nor any warning signs of the stairwell opening. The worker lifted the plywood and moved it all to another area. When he lifted the last piece, he walked forward and stepped into the unmarked stairway and fell 3 stories to the basement floor, where he died of massive trauma. Failure to secure the opening, lack of pre-task training, lack of planning, and failure to set up a controlled access zone were all contributing factors to this death. On December 20, 2019, a worker was assisting another worker building a scaffold at 20 Bruckner Boulevard in the Bronx. When the worker on the scaffold asked for another plank, and even though there were other planks available nearby, the decedent entered a controlled access zone, which you'll see on the left-hand side of this photograph. As he went over to pick up the decking on that left-hand side of the left-hand photo, he fell into the hole and fell 20 feet below. He was hospitalized and died 2 weeks later of his injuries. Allowing access to the controlled access zone without proper tie-off and equipment was a key factor. So that is the end of our fatalities for 2019, I'm sorry. And I'd like to go on for just some examples of near misses that we had where both safety operations had been put in place, in some instances and in some not, but where we had the chance of more fatalities. On February 16, a steel worker was installing a beam on the 3rd floor deck at 556 Bergen Avenue in the Bronx. He slipped off the beam and fell, but as he fell, his harness arrested the fall. He sustained some non-life-threatening injuries as he hit the beam below during the fall. On April 16th, at a high-profile project located at 200 Amsterdam Avenue in Manhattan, workers were stripping materials in the vicinity of the 26th floor. One of the workers lost control of the formwork and it fell out of the DOCA system through a net below the DOCA system and landing in the middle of West 69th Street. The 8-foot piece of formwork is visible in the right-hand photograph after it was retrieved and put into the back of the truck. There were no injuries. Failure to maintain control of the formwork and improper netting led to the incident. On June 1, DOB responded to another standoff bracket failure at 42 West 39th Street in Manhattan. Workers were moving the suspended scaffolds over a terrace projection, which angled the rig, and they were using a standoff bracket. Because of the strain on the C-hook, the standoff bracket slipped, impacted the coping stone, and caused it to rain down into the middle of West 39th Street, seen here on the right-hand photo. The inset photo on the left shows the height of the building, and the main photo on the left shows the twisted standoff bracket and C-hook. Due to these events, incidents with standoff brackets, we met with the Special Riggers Association and prohibited their use pending further study. Failing to protect the coping stone from impact, again, a leading factor in the previous fatality that we had, as well as not checking the supporting scaffold for loads imposed and missing the scaffold and misuse of the suspended scaffold led to the incident. I will also note that one of the 2 workers was hit by the coping stone as it came down, but it just glanced his shoulder and he had injuries that had to be treated, but they were not considered extremely serious. On June, I'm sorry, I have 2 different dates here, but it's on June 11th. The scaffold located at 243 4th Avenue, Brooklyn, was experiencing a high wind event. It was the subject of a warning from DOB the previous day that high winds were expected in the area. Suddenly, the scaffold was blown off the bulkhead and rained down into an outdoor cafe located next door to the construction site. Sitting in the cafe were several people. One of them, a woman, was struck in the head by one of the planks. She sustained extremely serious injuries but has survived. Investigation revealed that the ties used to stabilize the scaffold had been removed from the scaffold and that the contractor was awaiting a subcontractor who was notified 2 weeks earlier to dismantle the scaffold. Failure to safeguard this site was a major factor in this incident. On July 17th, a roof worker was replacing roofing material at the residence at 138-24 233rd Street in Queens, including underlying plywood sheathing. The worker, working close to the edge of the roof, failed to tie off and slipped from the roof 2.5 stories. His failure to tie off led to this incident. On July 30, a worker was using a crane to place roofing materials and steel dunnage onto the roof of 749 FDR Drive in Manhattan, a NYCHA building. During the pick, the crane operator bypassed the safety features of the crane, which was sending him an alert that he had overloaded the crane, and he lost control of the load and dropped the steel down onto the street and onto the FDR Drive service road. The crane boom was bent close to 90 degrees, as depicted in the left-hand photograph. And it required closure of the FDR Drive and additional cranes to dismantle the damaged unit. Investigation revealed that the operator overloaded the crane, exceeded the pick radius. He also used slings that were not rated to the lift of the load, causing them to break, as seen in the right-hand photo. There were a few minor injuries: improper planning, failure to use certified slings, bypassing machine safeties, failure to obtain weight of the load, and using the crane that was not rated for the pick as designed were all key factors in this incident. On September 13th, workers were lowering debris in a canvas bucket using a power winch at 270 Park Avenue in Manhattan. The workers overloaded the basket, causing the cable to snap and drop the load 10 stories. The load landed and went through the sidewalk shed and nearly hit a pedestrian. Failure to inspect the cables of the power winch and overloading the basket were key factors in this incident. On October 1st, workers were unloading debris onto a sidewalk shed from a suspended scaffold at 4414 Newtown Road in Queens. Unexpectedly, one of the outriggers for the scaffold was torn from its mount on the roof, that you see here on the left, and spiraled down to the shed below, piercing the parapet wall of the shed, as seen here on the right. Improper setup, lack of the proper counterweight support, and improper setup of the tiebacks were all contributing factors to this incident. With that, we'll go to questions. All right, so you see one of the questions we have is, besides documenting the events and issuing violations, does DOB do any work or provide services in these incidents? The answer to that is yes. We oftentimes end up working with people for long periods of time. I'm still working on some incidents from 2018 where there was major damage done, and to make sure that the engineers and architects that are involved in the project take corrective action to make sure that this gets resolved safely. As far as what we consider a near miss is whether there is major injuries or not. In this particular instance, although we had this collapse, we didn't have any serious injuries that occurred. and that is why we considered it a near miss. Had someone become injured during that incident, it would have been listed as, as an injury, but it was not. The question is to whether all projects were correctly permitted and safety personnel accredited and licensed. In most instances, they were. In the scaffold incident where the person went up to retrieve the items, it was not permitted, and it should have been. In the other incidents, all of them were permitted work, and some of them had safety professionals in sight. In one of the incidents, we actually took action to remove the license of the special rigger that was involved. The woman with the serious injury in the cafe, the last of my knowledge, is still in rehab. There were a few incidents that concerned excavation and soil work. What were the incidents that involved excavation and soil work? This year, we didn't have any major incidents involving excavation or soil work, although in previous years, that was a major factor. If you saw that on the pie chart, that was other incidents that occurred that did not lead to a fatality or a significant injury to the parties. Seahook seemed to produce a fatality per year and one or more near misses. What can be done to eliminate the risk? So we've already taken a number of actions in this area. The first one was the standoff bracket. What we found is the standoff bracket is not actually manufactured by the Seahook manufacturer. It's a third-party market item. And those devices, if they are not used 100% properly, have led to a number of these incidents. We have since prohibited the use of them while we do further study, but the future plan is to try and introduce legislation to ban them from the city of New York because of the number of incidents that we've had with them. The other thing that's been done is we now require that someone certify the conditions of the parapet walls prior to the installation, as well as making sure that that wall will handle the weight and the pressures from the Seahook. And in instances where it will not, that they have to go to another type of engineering using outrigger beams. There are a number of these events that are currently being contemplated for criminal charges in different courts and different district attorneys' offices. None of these events are 100% closed at this time. So far this year in 2020, I believe there are 5 fatalities. The new 2020 chapter of Chapter 33 has yet to go to City Council. We're expecting that it's going to go to City Council at some point before the end of the year, and we believe that adoption will be sometime next year. So probably will come into effect in around December of 2021, possibly a little later, depending on action by City Council. The Buildings Department, is there a difference in site safety between union and non-union projects as a factor? Are retraining and programs in place? We have a very hard time determining the answer to that question for a number of reasons. There are a lot of sites that are mixed sites that are both union and non-union working together. And we've had a number of incidents where one part of the site may be union, one part is non-union. An incident occurs and they blame each other as being the main contributing factor to the incident. Some years we have higher incidents on union sites. Some years we have fewer incidents on union sites. It varies by the type of incident, and it's very hard to not black and white to try and cut it and say, because very few sites are 100% union or 100% non-union. And so to try and make those determinations is not always the easiest. Okay. Looks like we're done with our questions. I thank everyone for tuning in and paying attention to the site and to this presentation. I hope it was insightful for you, and we look forward to next year's 2021 Build Safe, Live Safe conference. Thank you.